we're trying to get as many of them ready for what we're hoping is going to be an efflorescence of funding coming from the State Bond Act that we hope to see come out in 2022, as well as the infrastructure bill.
The hope is that money out of the infrastructure bill may end up coming to help organizations like yours with
trickling
this work.
down. We do hope to see that money trickle down. The Northeastern governors are strong, and we're hoping that our representatives will continue to keep us in mind. There's so many important infrastructure issues, but we argue that all of it starts with our natural water infrastructure. I mean, our fresh water is less than 1% of all water on the planet. And A, it just needs to be protected, but B, that's the basis of everything we rely on. Mother Nature's been doing pretty good for millennia at keeping our water fresh. So we want to support those systems because it's safety and because it's beautiful, but because we drink the water, we recreate in the water, we love these places that we protect.
And what are some of the projects that you're working on? What will they do to the river?
There are different problems in every kind of river system, but one of the challenges that, speeding up the description of it, that the Ausable system faces is because of the industrial use and the logging, the river became over-widened. And then as modern uses and modern development, roadway, rip-wrapping roads, hardening them to protect them, it continues to sort of exacerbate this problem of bank erosion because it's ping-ponging water back and forth. So what happens in the Ausable is you'll see wide, flat water where it's very shallow. And then you'll go down a little further and you'll see a healthier system with lots of trees, and it'll be deeper and there'll be tumbling water, and you'll go, why is that section flat? Well, that's probably because there are issues with it, issues upstream that are causing that dysfunction. So we can narrow that by building, basically it's an inner bank. So you've got a slope coming down and you can restore that inner bank so you create that deeper channel so that sediment movement is the job of the river. Sediment can move more efficiently and effectively down that channel. When it floods, it comes up on the floodplain, but in coming up on the floodplain, the water should slow, absorb, leave nutrients, come back down. But the tow woods we build, when you walk up to them, yeah, that excites me when we bring people to one of our systems and we go, so what do you see here? And they go, well, we see a healthy river. I'm like, look more closely. What are you standing on? And we can stand on some of these structures that we build, and they're all made of trees and native rock, no cables, no nails, no screws, just ingenuity. Of really expert excavator operators who, yes, get permission to go in the river and build these things. So we can narrow the river to focus the water. We can entrain it even more by building rock structures that mimic natural structures, and just give that river the shape it needs, and ideally our engineering, which is within like 1/10 of a foot. We hit these elevation marks and these XYZs on the map. We're ideally building a system that's self-sustaining. So we study the river so that we know what the river needs to build its self-sustaining potential, and we put that structure in place, and if we're right, we should walk away and be done.
You mentioned floodplains,
Right.
and you took us to one in the town of Jay that effectively is working.
One of the most important pieces of the puzzle that I think people can go, what can we do as a community, is preserve your floodplains. And that includes a variety of tactics. You need to know that the floodplain that is existing there, actually the river has access to it. In some cases, the river can have some dysfunction so that it can no longer get there, or old farming practices might have created some berming at the end there. It's real simple to punch through some of those as long as you're following your state or local regulations. So floodplains, intact floodplains with shrubs, native grasses, trees. When I first started doing this work, I was like, well, that can't really grab that much water from the system. It is overwhelming how much water in a floodplain, how much water in a flood can be absorbed by a floodplain. It's just an incredibly important piece of the puzzle. So when you build on them, when you block them, berm them, when you cut trees or shrubs from them, you are reducing their efficiency. And and I just can't explain enough how important it is for the community downstream when the community upstream might make a poor decision. Back in the day, we built on floodplains. We used them as agricultural centers. Today, agriculture can still use floodplains wisely, but having buffers in place is important. Thick buffers of plants, roughly as wide as the stream or the river itself, is a good starting point for people to think about. But a lot of building still occurs on floodplains, and it's not because people don't get it. It's, well, that's not the immediate floodplain. This is further back. Well, we should probably be looking at the 100-year floodplain. Given climate change, given what we know what's happening with these more frequent storms, I think it's time to say a 100-year floodplain might be a good thing to start setting aside. Does that mean we have to chase people off that are established on floodplains? No, but we do need to talk to them about when you're done, when it's time for you to go, if you're open, we would, as a community, like to buy that property and protect it. But we do need to simply stop developing our floodplains and start revegetating them and looking at them as a tool in our work to reduce flood impacts.
And are we seeing a loss of floodplains still? Are we seeing a decline?
Yes, we are. And even in protected places like the Adirondack Park, we're still seeing a loss of that. The other parallel are wetlands. Wetlands are just as important. And you know, we've been struggling as a nation to have no net loss of wetlands for decades, and it's still an elusive goal.
And the projects that you're working on, we talked about the funding. The hope is that the state will come through with funding. We hope that there may be money in the infrastructure bill that comes to you. But is funding, has it been consistent? Has there been an emphasis placed on the importance of taking care of the flood threats and working to improve our rivers? Or is it a constant battle and challenge to try to get the funding you need?
It's a constant challenge. It's unfortunately an expensive process. And it's not just some smart river scientist looks at the river and decides we need to do X, Y, and Z, let's get the machines. It's generally a year or two of study, if not more, intensive study in the field by people who have skills with costly machines that measure things very precisely. We rely on tools like LiDAR that's flown from aircraft that give you a real sense of where are old channels, where are new channels. We have incredible tools now, but they cost money and they take time to analyze. We tend to say a year to study, survey, a year to plan and think and permit, and then we're on the ground. So we look at a 2 to 3 year process. That doesn't mean it can't happen quickly, but the faster it happens, often the more expensive it is. So the cost of these projects is high. The willingness of private individuals is high, but they don't often have the funds. Foundations sometimes have that kind of money. Family foundations, larger institutions. One of our good mid-range funders has always been Patagonia, the clothing manufacturer. There are others. But we really rely at this point on state funds and federal funds. And some of those state funds come from agencies like the Department of Environmental Conservation or the New York Department of State. These are wonderful partners in this work. We do get funds from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and from the United States Environmental Protection Agencies. Groups like the Lake Champlain Basin Program are indispensable. But certainly, if we could get infrastructure bill money focused on these issues, once again, among all the other really important issues there are, if we could see some of that infrastructure money come down and start investing in a model for getting work done that I think saves so much money down the road, saves businesses, saves homes, and in some cases, sadly, saves lives. So it's hard, I think, for people to spend money up front, but the cost of these emergencies is extreme, and we all believe, I think at this point, that they're, whatever we want to call it, that these storms are getting bigger and they're happening more frequently.
And how do you prioritize your projects? How do you choose which ones need to be taken care of first?
We listen to our towns pretty closely. We have really good relationship at the town level. A lot of cases, it is influenced by funding. If a private landowner steps up and says, I have the money to do this, I want to do this in my section, and I will help my neighbor, and we don't have another project going, we will go where the money goes. But we try to work with the towns, with the counties, with the state to develop a priority list with our partners, and we do have a series of priorities based on basically biggest bang for the buck. And that might be, you know, communities made more safe that are economic drivers. Industries like our fishery industry, you know, a lot of people are like, well, you're trying to save fish. It's an important industry in our community. So we're constantly looking for the variables that make projects rise to the top. But we also try very hard to be equitable and just, because a lot of these communities don't have the resources to bounce back from these disasters. So we're there with them when we can be.